Hello everyone! I am very sorry that it's late. Mate, what a fucking week. Happy Friday everyone. Well done for making it through the week. It's been a pretty mad rush at my end. As you might see from the content in today's presentation. Please let me know if you can hear me in the comments. I hope I've set everything up properly. So I haven't actually been more than 1 minute late for a single TERF Wars so far ever. And now I'm like 20 minutes late. It's been chaos. There's been loads of editing. There's been loads of bullshit. This week has been incredibly stressful. So anyway, let's just chill out for a minute. I've got a really nice like raspberry vodka cocktail thing going on with real raspberries in it. Very fancy. I hope everyone is good. I hope you're enjoying your Fridays. Oh, piss now. Oh, I just dropped some makeup in Poppy's bed. What a day. Anyway, I was going to put this flower crown on because I just saw it. So we'll go for the flower crown this week. So anyway, let's be more professional. Welcome to TERF Wars, Season 2, Episode 12. Very exciting. So TERF Wars is the show where I, Katie Montgomery, go through the last week's worth of transphobic, gender critical, TERF nonsense, basically anything that's anti-trans, and look at the arguments and debunk them, or often laugh at them and sometimes rage at them. And that's the purpose of the show. And one of the things that I always like to say is, I've gone through and anonymised everyone. Please don't look up anyone who's been anonymised. This isn't about attacking people. This is about going after ideas and learning how to debunk various ideas, learning what's going on in the news, and yay, trans rights. Basically, that's like the theme of the show. But anyway, right. Hopefully we can get into the zone now. Let's see some ducks in chat. They'll give me some energy, I think, to be back on the Friday spirit. But anyway, I think we can probably move on to the slideshows. I've got quite a few slides. Oh no, that's the wrong button. Oh gosh. I think we've got quite a few slides this week, so we might as well move on straight onto them. So I usually start with the news, then we do a few like gender critical nonsense things, and then we move on to the general brain rot, and that's the theme that we're doing this week. So this was in the news. This could have easily been in the brain rot section, though this is from the BBC, which is probably the most respected news organisation in the UK, one of the most respected news organisations in the world, and they're just going for some generic clickbait nonsense that's just there to stir up hatred of trans people. So here they've got University of Manchester advises against using mother and father. Now, anyone who went to school in the UK in the 90s, from the comments as far back as the 60s, possibly beyond, will know that you used to get letters saying dear parent / guardian, because, you know, some families don't have mothers and fathers, or even mothers and fathers at all. And, you know, so it's good to just say dear parents or dear guardians. Dear parent / guardian works quite well. But now that trans people are in the news, and trans people are often blamed for like having to remember different words, you know, like we all know what this is about. They're trying to get people outraged because, oh, we can't even say mother and father anymore. You'll be arrested if you say you're a mother. You know, it's like the last 5 episodes worth. Janet Street Porter having to sacrifice her breasts because we want to include trans men as well. Like, it's just nonsense. They knew, whoever wrote this headline knew that it was clickbait nonsense. People flipped out. There was a load of angry comments, of course. And it's nothing new. It's nothing to, like, as if Manchester University, the only establishment that says right parent / guardian, it probably was just some update. I didn't even read the article, so judge me for that what you like. But it's just bullshit. It just means nothing. No one cares. Well, no one who isn't irrationally outraged about trans people cares. This wasn't the only bullshit BBC article this week. I didn't have time to include the other one, but the BBC is just on a crusade against trans people. It's fucking shit news organisation now. Anyway, this was another exciting piece of UK news. So Ash Sarkar is a left-wing pundit, commentator. I don't know what her official title is. Someone who says left-wing things on the internet and is famous for that. She's quite good. She usually comes out with some reasonable takes and gets loads of flack because she's a woman and not white and all the other things that people get offended about. But recently, someone called Julie Burchill wrote a load of stuff about her, including some weird attacks about her being, about Ash being a Muslim. And it was pretty disgusting. Anyway, Julie Burchill's lawyers advised her to write an apology letter, and she wrote this really grovelling apology, and Ash just commented here saying, you know, that's good. It was a load of disgusting racist comments, and she's backed down and said, okay, they were racist, I couldn't defend these in court. So I wouldn't be bringing this up apart from the fact that Julie Burchill is gender critical and one of the many journalists in the UK who writes anti-trans articles for all of the major news organisations. And it's worth noting that Ash got a lot of abuse over this, and that's one of the things she talks about. I mean, it's worth reading Ash's Guardian article or any of the comments she's made about this, because it talks about when someone comes for you, and this is going to come up again later in this episode, when like a horde comes for you and you get cancelled, like it can be pretty grim. You get like some grim abuse. And because when gender critical people funnel abuse, there's always this kind of like, oh, if they support trans rights, they're even worse. And Ash is trans inclusive, because she's not a dickhead. And so that meant loads of people. And I haven't actually managed to include them in this episode. And there was some from last episode that I didn't manage to include because I just don't have time to edit them all. But loads of people calling Ash a man because, like, of course, the only women who would support trans rights would be trans women. Ash is a cis woman. Like, she got loads of, you know, racist abuse and abuse about being a Muslim, but also including like transphobic abuse. That was definitely a feature, and it's something that she mentioned in discussing this. So that came up. So anyway, as part of this big explosion, Julie Burchill was writing a book and her publisher cancelled her. Her publisher decided not to publish her book after her saying a load of racist things, which I think is understandable, really. Anyway, of course, that meant that she was cancelled, and because she's anti-trans, that means she then gets to go and talk in all of the newspapers, which happened, of course, because it always flipping does. But then Julie Burchill got a new book publisher. And this week, as well as Julie Burchill having to back down and apologise to Ash about saying racist things, she also had to drop her new publisher after the new publisher was identified as a white nationalist. Well, anyway, so it doesn't stop there. So here's just the bit confirming that she's white nationalist. She said something, she was tweeting about Jews and Israel, and she said, because when you are very anti-Islam and you haven't thought about the Jewish question, which, by the way, is a proper full-on like Nazi phrase, the Jewish question. It has its own Wikipedia page. It's worth looking up and understanding, and saying you're a Tommy Robinson supporter. It's kind of the way you're led, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, she said a few pretty grim, just like Nazi dog whistles, basically. But like, kind of, these things stand alone. I mean, Julie Burchill happens to be gender critical and said a load of racist stuff. And then she got a new publisher. And on the same week, as, you know, getting this, having to apologise to Ash, then had to drop her new publisher because the new publisher turns out to be, even worse. But like, why would this new publisher even have links to Julia Burchill? Why did they take her up? Well, it turns out the new publisher is gender critical and is pro LGB Alliance, has an I stand with J.K. Rowling. So that's the links. That's why I can't say for sure that's why they know each other. They might know each other for a whole number of reasons. But the gender critical, movement is very insular. They all know each other. There's quite a lot of photos, there's photos of Julie Burchill with all of the other classic gender critical people, Posey Parker, Julia Long, all of those people, at a pub having a drink and stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if these two knew each other from... if you've got LGB Alliance and I stand with J.K. Rowling in your Twitter bio and you're called sane feminist, then, when someone is this gender critical, they're not just it's not just a casual, I don't like trans people, mainly I do other things. If you've got these things in your bio, then you're full on. Yet we all know that when you discover a gender critical Twitter account, it's their life 24/7. That's all they flip and do. And I don't know. It's worth noting that someone who had to be dropped because of coming up with comments about the Jewish question was pro LGB Alliance and had I stand with J.K. Rowling and was gender critical, because that's not really a surprise. Anyway, another thing that happened this week was the debate, I think, in the Senate in the USA about the Equality Act. So the Equality Act is about banning prejudice and bringing in protections for women and LGBT people particularly. I think it covers others groups. I haven't fully understood the whole thing. But of course the Republicans are pushing against it because it brings in LGBT and women's protections. But it's worth noting what they're using to push against it. They are pushing against it because of women's rights and gay rights, but they're also very focusing on the trans rights aspect of it, because it brings in protections for trans people, federally across the whole country, which is a really big deal for America. That's a really big deal. If this were to pass, which I think it sounds like it's unlikely that it will because of America's stupid system where you need a super majority rather than just a majority to vote or something. If this were to pass, then lots of states are going to have to change their laws and they'll start losing in court. Places like Tennessee, which are very anti-trans, would have to, change so many of their positions on trans people. So the Republicans are all on against it, but it's worth noting what they're saying. And we've said a few times on this show, TERF Wars, and also on my other show, which is on tomorrow at 9 p.m, which is the XX Factor. We've mentioned how this is the year that gender critical hits the American mainstream, because gender critical has been mainstream in the UK since 2018, but this is the year that it hits the USA. And we'll be able to start seeing all of their same dog whistles. We've seen it a little bit before, but Donald Trump said one recently, and here's Ted Cruz talking about war on women. Bearing in mind, the Republican Party has been maneuvering to try and ban abortion, which is literally the most war on women thing going on in the USA. An actual war on women, war on women's bodily autonomy, their ability to just have equal rights to everyone else. That's what lots of women and feminists have been worrying about in the USA, is the Republicans maneuvering to ban abortion. For years that's been a thing that's been going on. And now all of a sudden, war on women, which is a gender critical phrase, Ted Cruz is saying it. And he's not the only one. I've put these two in the wrong... Oh no, I've put a couple of these in the wrong order. Okay, well, anyway, there's a person here, some lady who's saying, she's talking about women and girls. She said sex-based rights. I've missed out a screenshot here. Oh And says like several gender critical dog whistles in a row in the same tweet, and then has anti-feminist in her bio. Because, of course, I've actually got another one here. So here's another lady who says, when gender identity is privileged over biological sex, females lose. It's that simple. Like, that is a gender critical sentence. Like, that, all of those words, that's just straight out of the gender critical mainstream from the UK. And this lady writes for the Daily Caller, which is Tucker Carlson's, news organization. So, like, the American right and far right have jumped all in on gender critical rhetoric. Because we knew that they would. I think this has been inevitable, but it's just worth pointing out how one of the things that I was mentioning this week on Twitter was how, in a way, it's kind of refreshing seeing the Americans talk about trans rights and gender critical, because in the UK, all of the media organisations are pushing gender critical stuff. Like, none of them ever would dare be like anti-gender critical. I don't think I've ever seen an explicitly anti-gender critical article from any UK news organisation. Sometimes they're pro-trans, they're never anti-gender critical. Because there's so many gender critical people working in the media in the UK, and it's all very insular, and it's just so one-sided. But then on top of that, everything in the UK is a bit like polite and like hidden and not so in your face. But like, this is half a compliment and half not. Lots of love to all of my American audience, but Americans don't quite do subtlety like the UK does. So when it comes to discussing trans rights in America in the mainstream, the Republicans go all in, and they'll have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene who will think that, trans people are lizard aliens or whatever, created by Jewish space lasers, and that will be just like, they'll have this really polarized view, and all these anti-feminists and nationalists and stuff will be taking on these positions. But then they're also, and that's bad. That is scary. It's scary when the far right takes on anti-trans positions. But on the other hand, their left wing, which isn't super left wing, but left wing for America, is just pro-trans, and they'll come out with these anti-gender critical pieces. They'll come out with these explicitly pro-trans articles without any fake balance like the BBC would try. And it's kind of refreshing to see it not positioned as some kind of, trans people are trying to attack feminists kind of thing. In America, it's like the feminists are pro-trans rights and all the anti-feminists are anti-trans rights, which is what makes sense. But that's not how the UK media tries to present it. Anyway, it's interesting seeing this. But here I also had a shot of WOLF, which is the Women's Liberation Front, which are, according to themselves, radical feminists who regularly ally with the right and far right against trans people. And here they are talking about this lady who describes she calls herself a constitutionalist first and then anti-feminist second. And WOLF are, backing her up, saying the Equality Act will end female-only sports and accommodations, ends freedom of association for women, standard nonsense that they come out with. The Violence Against Women Act will put men in women's shelters and prisons. They're opposing the Violence Against Women Act because it helps trans people as well as cis people. That's the bottom line is, for them, it's less important to help cis women than it is to stop trans women from getting protections. And that's what all this ends up being about. But yeah, it's just worth watching how the Americans are handling the trans rights reactionary bullshit that's going on compared to how the British are, because I think the Americans do everything more extreme, so they are a lot better and a lot worse than us, and that kind of makes it more obvious to see what's going on. So I don't know, I'm quietly optimistic about the Americans getting involved, because although that will mean all of the the Republicans and Tucker Carlson and the Daily Caller and Breitbart and stuff will all come out in strong support of gender critical, and that will mean gender critical will be super international mainstream. I mean, that's going to happen this year. It's kind of already happened. It's happening right now. It also means that all of the positions against trans rights will, against gender critical, will start getting platformed for the first time in American news organisations. The UK isn't going to start platforming them, but it will mean that English, Scottish, Welsh, Northern Irish readers will see these positions kind of for the first time. So that is good. And, their positions are irrational garbage. So I just hope that enough people see both sides rather than just one side like you see in the UK. Anyway, onwards. So this is what I titled the show about. So this is something going on at the moment in the UK. The Conservatives, when they were last elected, or even several elections ago, I'm not sure, it might have been related to Theresa May, promised that they were going to try and ban conversion therapy, which is good. And it's kind of surprising coming from the Conservatives, I guess, in an overall sense. Like, the Conservatives were the ones who legalised gay marriage, so that's great. Genuinely props to them for doing that, because that's an amazing thing. And the Conservatives also proposed the reform of the Gender Recognition Act, which is also good. So the Conservatives were pushing for LGBT rights for a while, and part of that was pushing for a ban on conversion therapy. Though recently we've got a more extreme government in, at the moment they're pretty grim. But there's still this debate about conversion therapy, and the thing with banning conversion therapy is it's so clear. There is just no sensible argument for not banning conversion therapy. Conversion therapy is such a slam dunk bullshit. There's there is literally decades of science showing it doesn't work, and not only that it doesn't work, that it causes a lot of harm. It causes harm to all LGBT people. It's a disgusting practice. It still goes on today, and in its most extreme form, conversion therapy is just outright physical torture. And even in its most mild form, it's still a type of torture because it still causes a lot of mental anguish. There's lots of evidence to show that it can cause lasting damage to people. And it's really horrible, and we should have banned it absolutely ages ago. Several countries have banned it now. I think one of the most recent ones was parts of Australia started banning it. So it's starting to happen, and I'm hoping in the next couple of years that most of the developed world will ban it. And the UK has said it, there was a point where we were kind of leading in LGBT rights, and obviously with the gender critical movement we're now not at all. But it's very hard for the gender criticals to, if you come out saying I support conversion therapy in any way, even coded, it just sounds very bad. It's a bit like having a coded non-support for gay marriage today is kind of political suicide, which is good because it's grim. And conversion therapy is just so extreme. It's just it's so disgusting that it's very hard for you to defend, even in the most roundabout way. So of course, LGB Alliance have tried some roundabout way of talking about it. They've got this is of their, I think this is an email they send out to all of their supporters. They've got something where they're like, oh, we think conversion therapy is bad, but, and at the bottom of the email, they've said, in the meantime, we are putting together a list of therapists who offer something other than affirmation-only approach for children with gender dysphoria. Please get in touch if you're a therapist and interested in being involved in this initiative. So this is another distinction between the UK and the USA. In the UK, if you came out and said, I support gay conversion therapy, that would tank your career. If you're right wing or left wing, it doesn't matter. That would be game over. I hope. At least I think today that would be, so unacceptable. Whereas in America, there are lots of people who can say that, I think. You probably have politicians at the highest level who will say that. But there are lots of transphobic people here who are trying to... The thing is, you can't ban conversion therapy for gay people without also banning it for trans people, because it's the same practice for the same reasons. It just targets people in a slightly different way, but it's equally discussed. It's all the same methods of trying to blame being LGBT on it being a choice or a cause of it's caused by abuse or some they're all the standard anti-LGBT arguments. But so that means it's very difficult for all of these anti-trans groups to say what they want to say is their main focus is we don't want to ban on conversion therapy for trans people, because if they had that would be very difficult for them to do what they want. I mean, that's just a ban on conversion therapy for trans people will be bad for the gender critical movement. So they oppose it, but it's very difficult for them to oppose it openly, even more so than lots of the stuff they oppose. So they've gone for this any therapists who don't do affirmation only, wink wink, they're trying to come up with this list and discuss the best way to avoid this kind of stuff. They also did this 20 tweet long thread. I'm not going to read out all of this, but they've said, recently there's been a debate in Parliament about LGBT conversion therapy in response to a petition with 257,000 signatures. So, people in the UK want this to be banned. I think the majority of people who care about LGBT people at all, positive or negative, want conversion therapy banned. They've said this campaign is driven by LGBT organisations including Mermaids, Stonewall and Gendered Intelligence. So we know from the start that the agenda can't be pro-gay. Such a joke. LGB Alliance is such a fucking embarrassment. They're trying to spin Stonewall, literally the largest LGBT organisation in Europe, as not pro-gay. That's the state that they've had to get into. That's what they're selling to their followers. Total garbage. Anyway, they're trying to explain why a ban on conversion therapy is bad. So they've said at the bottom, sorry, so many tweets here. Oh, anyway, they've said they have questions. I think there was a part where they've said, we don't think a ban is the right way to go. Hang on, let me just see. Oh, but we're not yet convinced that legislation is the best way to stop conversion therapy. Nonsense. Anyway, they've said, here are some questions. For one thing, whether we like it or not, lots of people, gay or straight, are attracted to strange religious organisations. If we ban them from teaching anti-gay nonsense, should we also ban them from teaching women to be humble maid servants of men? Yeah. Of course. I don't this is kind of this is a flipping ridiculous argument. Conversion therapy is not the same as a religious person saying women are inferior to men. A religious person saying women are inferior to men is fucking bullshit. It's plainly misogynistic and they can fuck off. But at the same time, it's not literally a torture regime designed to change who they are as a person at a fundamental level. So it's kind of a rubbish argument anyway, but it's also extra rubbish on top of there being what? You're saying we should ban conversion therapy? Well, next you'll be saying we should ban misogyny. It's well, I'm up for a ban of misogyny. Nonsense. And then you've said, proponents also point to cruel and coercive ill treatment. Surely that will constitute abuse and offenders will be persecuted anyway. Well, no, because that's the whole problem, is they're not. That's why we need a ban on conversion therapy, is today conversion therapy isn't being prosecuted against. It needs its own special law because it's very deceptive and the stuff they do, they're not punching people. Though, to be clear, conversion therapy in the past has literally involved electrocuting people and all kinds of disgusting physical torture. But conversion therapy isn't just that. It also is just like, you know, with a nice, happy therapist who smiles at you and just tells you, you may be a child, that who you are, who you were born is wrong and broken, and you need to change yourself. And they'll teach you these disgusting, like, brainwash techniques to try and de-LGBTify yourself, which is impossible. Our biggest issue with the proposed ban is on the question of psychotherapy. The proponents ignore the fact that no psychotherapist is allowed to pressure a patient to change their sexual orientation or gender identity. It would be against ethical norms. Then what's the problem? Like, absolutely nonsense. We hear from therapists that this guidance is being misinterpreted. They tell you you're discouraged from neutral counselling. That is the task of all mental health care professionals. Like, they're trying to cut... almost feel sorry for them in that they're trying to, like, oppose a ban on conversion therapy on trans people without, like, coming up with a good enough excuse to ban conversion therapy on gay people. And it's just impossible. It's the same thing. They're trying to find this line in between, and there just isn't one. Like, it's such a load of garbage. I'll just move out the way. If anyone wants to pause this and read all of this absolute garbage, you're welcome to. I'm not going to read it all out, but they're quite clearly, I mean, they are explicitly arguing against a ban on conversion therapy, but they're also, like, trying to come up with an excuse against a ban on conversion therapy, and they're particularly focused around trans children, you know, which is disgusting. Like, this group is disgusting. They're disgusting people who are openly opposing a ban on all conversion therapy, but particularly for trans people. And I just think this is a classic example of gender critical brain rot. You can't, if you can only support all conversion therapy or oppose all conversion therapy, because it's the same thing, then, you know, anyone who really cared about gay rights would support a ban on conversion therapy regardless of what else that meant. Whereas LGB Alliance have placed their hatred of trans people above their supposed love of gay people, which they obviously don't give a shit about gay people at all. And that's why they're opposing a ban on conversion therapy. So anyway, I think that I'd just like to say on this issue, everyone in the UK, I think you should write to your MPs and you should say, I support a ban on conversion therapy. Please, can you represent me in Parliament and say, I support a ban on conversion therapy. I talked to my MP the other day and they had never talked to a trans person before and they had literally no idea about any of this. Like, it's very easy to think that MPs, like, know all of this stuff and, you know, they already have strong ingrained opinions. Lots of them have their own opinions about something else, you know, the climate or the budget or healthcare or something, and they just don't know about LGBT people. And sure, you might have some shit politician who is explicitly gender critical, like if you had Jackie Doyle-Pearce, then, you know, you're fucked. But there are a lot of politicians in this country who are in power, and lots of them know nothing about LGBT people. And if you write in and you say, I support conversion therapy, and maybe 5 other people from your constituency do, then they might be like, oh, people support a ban on conversion therapy. So it's genuinely worth it. And that's the one thing that I would say today. All UK people, please write to your politicians and say, I support ban on conversion therapy. And I know when you say LGBT people, you mean lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, asexual, pansexual, blah, 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 like everyone. That's what you mean. But when it comes to law, they're considering 2 things, sexual orientation and gender identity. And you need to explicitly say both. You need to say, I support a ban on conversion therapy for LGBT people, including sexual orientation and gender identity. It's important we defend both gay people and trans people from this disgusting torture practice. Like, just say it explicitly, because if they get in their mind conversion therapy, they might often just think of gay people. And then when someone says to them, oh, we can't ban it for trans people, they might stumble and then they might oppose a ban for everyone and everyone loses. Anyway, here's another artilist, listicle. Here's another article that was in the Times. I've no idea why it's in this format. This is the only screenshot I've got hold of. But the Times is probably the most anti-trans newspaper in the UK. So they've written this thing opposing a ban on conversion therapy, and they've signed it. Alison Bailey, so that's a member of the LGB Alliance. Joe Barstoch, who is a gender critical person. Like, here's a list of like names of gender critical people who, of course, oppose a ban on conversion therapy. Dr. David Bell, who is often cited about the case against trans healthcare. This is a different Bell. So Kira Bell was the I've forgotten the word for it. The person who was suing them. She's a detrans lady. Dr. David Bell is unrelated, but turns out Dr. David Bell has been pushed as an expert for, like, to do with trans healthcare and trans children, and has literally never in his life worked with trans children. But that's just conveniently glossed over by organisations like the Times. This guy has absolutely no authority at all, but is being pushed as an expert because he's a doctor and he's worked with children in the past, not trans children. Dr. Michael Biggs is another, like, anti-trans nutter. Dr. Heather Brusnell-Evans. Dr. Az Hakim, I haven't actually heard of. Debbie Hayton, of course. Teresa Katz, I haven't heard of. Posey Parker, Keely J. Keane, and Graham Linehan. You know, the whole crew is there. It's just bullshit. There's also all of the other the groups at the top. Fair Play for Women, who we're going to mention in a bit. Labour Women's Declaration, LGB Alliance, Transgender Trend. Like, Transgender Trend have been a pro-conversion therapy group since they founded, so that's quite unsurprising. But I think they haven't really, the gender critical movement hasn't really realised how bad a ban for conversion therapy would be for them until very recently. I think they've known about it, but it hasn't been their focus. And now they're suddenly trying to step it up. And so I think we're going to see a lot more of this in the coming weeks because Parliament is genuinely taking this seriously. So I really think it's important that you should write to your MP. I'm going to write to my MP tomorrow and say, like, I demand a ban on conversion therapy because it's disgusting. So anyway, moving on. Right. So this is another big story from this week. So you might remember last week, a lady in London was abducted and murdered, and a policeman has been charged with the crime. It's really disgusting. It was a lady called Sarah Everard, and it sparked like a nationwide, maybe even international conversation about women's safety after dark. She was walking on a main street. She did everything. She was talking to her boyfriend on the walk home, on the phone. Like, she did everything properly, and she was still killed. And it's a misogynistic hate crime, and it's absolutely disgusting. And so there was a vigil for her, and it's like, a vigil and protest saying, this is bullshit. Women were getting together, not just women, women and men and everyone was getting together to say, this is unacceptable. In London, in a safe area, women should be able to walk home and not risk their lives from being killed, potentially by a policeman. It's fucking disgusting. But then, of course, because the current government is so bullshit, there was a vigil for her, and the police turned up and basically started a riot and arrested a load of people and got all violent. And this photo is kind of iconic. Here they are arresting a woman who was protesting against misogynistic violence by the police, facing violence from the police. This is kind of an iconic photo, and it's just unreal. It's absolutely unreal that, potentially a policeman has murdered a woman, and in protesting against it, the police turned up and got all violent with a load of women. It's just beyond ridiculous. Of course that fucking happened, but it's just disgusting. But so of course, you know, any feminist would see woman walks home alone, gets killed by a policeman, you know, potentially hasn't been convicted yet, but has been charged. And then there's a huge protest of mainly women, or at least led by women, saying violence against women is disgusting. We need to do something about it. You know, all the feminists, of course, are on board with this. This is like a big flashpoint moment for feminists. And, you know, my timeline was absolutely on fire with British feminists talking about this issue and strongly, you know, pushing for all these ideas in order to combat misogynistic violence and all kinds of things, of course. But, like, I actually genuinely, like, this is stupid of me, but I actually genuinely thought this might be an issue that we united with gender critical people over, but of course it isn't. Like, all of the gender criticals have gone against this. Well, not all of them, but, you know, lots of them. Here's someone saying, it was revolting what happened when the vigil was hijacked. I'm horrified by those misleading, carefully choreographed and selectively edited / framed videos and pictures have gone around the world. Sisters Uncut, trans activists out in force. You couldn't make it up. And then there's a picture of a banner on a tree that says, misogyny is hatred of women. And then underneath it says, TERF, the acronym for trans exclusionary radical feminist who are transphobic. You know, they're just one little thing. But I think they're actually quote tweeting Hackney Resistors. Resistors is like a series of, it's like a group of groups. There are lots of different resistors groups around the UK who are usually just one person with a Twitter account who are anti-trans, basically. I know Hackney Resistors were on this. Hackney is a place in London. So these people are angry because, you know, it says transphobia is bad on the sign. I'm sure there were all kinds of views on trans people at a vigil for violence against women, but Reclaim the Streets was a movement that sprung out of this. So the idea, you know, reclaim the streets for women, reclaim, you know, women's ability to walk home in the dark. Reclaim the Streets organised this big vigil, and it was officially cancelled by the police, and most people ignored the cancellation and turned up anyway, and that's when the police violence happened. But Reclaim the Streets, you know, they've started this organisation, they raised a load of money, and then they had to officially say it's been cancelled because, you know, if they were still egging people on, they'd be in trouble with the police. And they've said, instead, we are fundraising £320,000 for women's causes, £10,000 for every fine for the vigils originally scheduled. So, you know, they've decided to raise money for women's issues over this. I think, you know, that's a good move, really. Although the vigil did kind of go ahead, it wasn't in the official manner that was planned by this group in the first place. You know, it's kind of the best they can do in the circumstances. Someone's replied here saying, hi, I'm very happy to donate, but would you mind confirming that the charities you'll eventually give the money to will be trans inclusive? And as far as I could tell, the person who asked this question was a cis woman. Reclaim These Streets, says, hi, absolutely yes. Women means all women, including trans women, all women. Femmes, non-binary people, and gender non-conforming people deserve to be safe. Thank you for the support. So this meant the gender critical people were not happy at all. And I'd just like to point out, if I saw a group spring up and it wasn't run by one of the known gender critical people who we all know the names of by now, I would just assume that included trans women, because why wouldn't it? We're talking about misogynistic violence against women walking home on their own. Like, of course that includes trans women. Trans women are included in the misogynistic violence, so you would expect them to be included in the protest against it. I I mean, I understand why this person asked. I'm not having a go at this person who's asked if it's trans inclusive, because, you know, from the climate at the moment, especially in the UK, people are nervous about it. But of course, I would assume anything like this is pro-trans. Or it doesn't have to be pro-trans, just not anti-trans. Trans-neutral is absolutely fine. The state of the UK, that if you're not explicitly anti-trans, I am very in support of you. Fucking joke. Anyway, here we go. Here goes the conspiracy theory. Thanks. I was going to donate, but now my money will go to a real women's cause and not a charity that supports women-only spaces. Here's James Dreyfus, who is a cis man who has somehow become a gender-critical icon. I guess it's because Graham Linehan got banned from Twitter. He says, after seeing what the organiser of Reclaim the Streets has tweeted, I'd make darn sure that you find out where your donations are going. I asked last night. No reply. No reply, no donation. 500 likes from him. Here's Posey Parker sending out a thing saying, I want women to know that any donations to this organisation, Reclaim the Streets, is unlikely to go to a women's-centred charity. When they say unlikely to go to a women's-centred charity, they mean the charity won't explicitly exclude trans people. Like, of course a women's charity includes trans women. They're fighting against misogynistic violence. If your goal was, I oppose misogynistic violence, then that would be helpful for trans women. You wouldn't even have to mention trans women at all. It literally doesn't matter. You could say, I am opposed to misogyny, and that by default includes opposing the misogyny that trans women face, because it means all misogyny. You would have to explicitly say, via dog whistles or otherwise, we are not fighting against misogyny for trans women. And that's why they're all angry, because this group has said, well, of course we include trans women. So they're saying it's not women-centred. When, it's a little dog whistle from the anti-trans crew means, whoever their woman is, adult, human, female, banners, they're saying that it includes trans. It doesn't explicitly exclude trans women, so we're angry about it. Get your money back. I'd just like to comment on this photo. They've taken this photo, I don't know if you've ever seen any gender critical protests, but they are chronically undermanned, I was going to say, but they often only have 8 people, and they're often the same 8 people. That they often have very few people turn up at them. And this photo is kind of taken to make it look like the whole streets might be full. And I just wonder if there's another angle of this shot. I just feel like there might only be 8 people in this shot. I couldn't say either way. We'll probably never know, but I've yet to see a zoomed out shot of a UK gender critical protest with more than 10 people. So here we have a little video clip from the lady who we just saw in the picture. Let's just go back to her quickly. This lady here with the red hair who's being knelt on by the police. So here's a little quick interview from her, and I think it's worth just listening to what she has to say.
Joined here by Patsy Stevenson. Patsy, you were arrested tonight by the police when you joined the vigil in Clapham Common. Can you tell us, one, why did you come down to the Common, and then what led to your arrest?
Well, first of all, I came here to support any woman, whether it be cis woman or trans woman, every single woman who cannot walk down the street by themselves because of the fear of men. And it's not all men, we know that, that's not what we're saying, but, there does need to be a change where women have freedom to live their lives in peace without fear. The fact that the police turned up was just disgraceful, because before then it was a peaceful protest. I was arrested by police for standing there. I wasn't doing anything. They threw me to the floor. They have pictures of me on the floor being arrested, and I'm 5'2" and I weigh nothing. And several police were on my back trying to arrest me. They arrested me in cuffs, dragged me away, surrounded by like 10 police officers. And when I got in the van, they said, "We just need your name and your address, and then we'll let you go with the fine." So I don't see the point of the arrest, to be honest. I don't know what that was for.
Okay. In your opinion, what should we do next?
What should we do next?
Yeah.
Bigger protest.
Yeah!
Come on.
When should we do it?
Now. Tomorrow? Yeah, now. Let's go now. No, just whenever we can rally the troops. We need to rally the troops, and now people will see, because we already knew this vigil wasn't properly cancelled. Everyone said, yeah, officially it's cancelled. But we knew it wasn't cancelled. It wasn't going to be, because people are angry. And too right, they fucking should be. They should be angry.
And where should we protest?
Everywhere. Worldwide. No, worldwide. It needs to go worldwide.
So this should be a global...
It should be a global, same as Black Lives Matter, same as anything that matters.
Do you think that we should go outside Scotland Yard?
Yeah, everywhere. Every county,
Absolutely
What
everywhere.
impact do you think it has on women seeing that many police getting heavy-handed unnecessarily with a bunch of women at a vigil for a woman who was murdered?
I think it's disgusting, but I think it's showing women that we can fight against them, and it's just going to push us more. So it's up to them, really. Do you know what I mean? And I even spoke to some of the female police officers, and I said like.
Anyway, fucking legend. Patsy Stevenson, like, absolutely shout out. I love her energy here. I love her accent. I love what she's saying. I totally agree. Fucking bullshit. Protest against police violence against women. The gender critical people did not think the same thing. Here we go. Call me cynical, but maybe their funds are being used to pay for things like crisis actors. So for anyone who doesn't know, crisis actors means someone who is hired to make a protest look worse than it is or something. So famously, Alex Jones has accused school shooting survivors of being crisis actors, which means the, like, I don't know, liberals, the left wing, the Democrats, I don't know, someone, George Soros, has paid random children to convincingly pretend that they were in a school shooting in order to ban guns in the US. I don't know, nonsense. But here the claim is that this lady was somehow paid by probably George Soros again to something. I don't know if you noticed, but in her clip at the start she said, this protest is about women being able to walk home from streets, cis women or trans women, all women being able to walk home safely. And she just said cis women or trans women. And then, you know, there was a good minute worth extra of her talking about what's going on, what we need to do, stuff. But she just said including trans women. And that means the gender criticals were absolutely furious, because this lady was like international famous for this interview, for that photo. She's also an actor. So that means, obviously, that she was paid to... The whole protest was staged. This whole thing staged. Like, oh, it's all fake. Here we go, someone else. This actress did a splendid job last night. That's all I'm saying. Here's our mate James Dreyfus joining in. Of course he believes that. Like he's going to come up again. But anyway, here's someone else. Wow, misleading film frame here. The police are shoving that woman to try and keep her off the flowers. She is trampling on. All four of them were with Sisters Uncut, trans rights activists who hijacked the vigil. Sisters Uncut are a feminist group who are opposing the austerity measures from the Conservatives, from like David Cameron's government, which, you know, ages ago. I don't know when that first started, 2008 or something. Because austerity affects women more than men on average. And so a feminist group sprang up to oppose austerity. I mean, that's a standard left-wing position, and it's a standard feminist position, I think. So now they've been rebranded to trans rights activists. Elsewhere, I think they've been branded men's rights activists, because the gender criticals just need to call everyone that, despite men's rights activists agreeing with them in full on trans rights. But yeah, And there is so much of this. Is someone else replying to James Dreyfus? So now we need to ask, if the vigil was changed to a protest because of bad actors, did the police take the right action? And secondly, was the stunt with the arrested girl pre-arranged? The police were trying to protect the floral tributes. Oh, the reason we had to kneel on this woman's head is because she was standing on a flower. Like, what are you talking about? The most bullshit apologist wank. Like, the police were trying to protect the floral tributes on the bandstand. Sisters Uncut and other trans activists. Like, Sisters Uncut are they are actually explicitly pro-trans, but they're not a trans rights group. They're a women's rights group, and they're explicitly anti-austerity. That's like their thing. That's why they're called Uncut, because it's about cutting support for women's services like shelters and, similar things. They did not form to do trans rights. They just said trans women are also affected by this. Trans women are also affected by misogyny. They're also affected by government cuts, again, for shelters and things, which trans women use today. So we're pro-trans, like, of course, like most feminist groups. Anyway, trans activists choreographed an aggressive action, hijacked the vigil, clambered over the floral tributes to force the police to arrest people in front of loads of cameras. Like, what are you on about? Feckin' trans activists hijacking a women's event, grabbing the platform to push their own gender identity on... Oh, this is a tongue twister. To push their own gender identity ideology agenda. Yeah, of course, mate. Every arrest, every retweeted clip in the response from the Met Police was much more than Reclaim the Streets could ever hope for in their wildest dreams. Am I being unreasonable to suspect it was all a put-up job, a publicity stunt to get on TV? Call me cynical, but I'm an old woman who's lived through the Thatcher era. I don't think you were being unreasonable. The whole thing stinks to heaven, and the worst thing about it is they have hijacked the memory of Sarah Everard. I mean, they're just full of, like, there was so many of these. There were so many people who didn't just think that trans activists has hijacked a vigil from, like, again, this is about misogynistic violence, and particularly from the police, but in general, misogynistic violence against women. But even if you don't think trans women are women because you're an idiot, trans women still just obviously face misogynistic violence. If you oppose misogynistic violence, if you agree with the sentence, I oppose misogynistic violence, then you are pro-trans. Like, that's just inevitable. You would have to say, I oppose misogynistic violence, but not against trans people, in order for you to not be pro-trans. You would have to include an extra specifier. But so not only do the gender critical crew think that this is some kind of trans rights super conspiracy to take over, they also think it was like staged, and like trans people are famously rich. We all have so much money. Like they somehow like have paid some actress to, like, they paid the police to arrest an actress who then gave a pretty good but like clearly off the cuff speech about why women's rights are important. I don't know, standard gender critical conspiracy makes absolutely no sense. I think this Mumsnet comment sums it up. So the public generously gave just shy of £500,000 to reclaim these streets without stopping to think, who am I giving to? People are now understandably upset that the organisers appear to be full-on TRAs. Bearing in mind, these are not... like, there's a difference between a feminist who happens to support trans people and someone who explicitly only focuses on trans rights or mainly focuses on trans rights. Like, I would like to consider myself as a feminist, but... I mean, I am a feminist, but I would like to say I'm a feminist and that's why I support trans rights. And that is true. The only reason I support trans rights is because I'm a feminist, and if trans rights were anti-feminist, then I couldn't in good conscience support them, even though it affects me. However, I do spend a lot of my time focused on trans rights because as a trans person, they directly affect me. My actual freedoms, my actual human rights are on the line in the UK at the moment. So of course, a lot of my energy is focused on trans rights. And I totally understand why cis women would spend most of their time on cis women's rights. Women's rights is the bigger issue overall. Women's rights is a global issue, for half of the population of the entire world. Like over 3 billion people are women. There aren't nearly that many trans people. And if someone said, I spend all my time fighting for women's rights particularly, and that might be like someone who just spends all their time on abortion rights. Abortion rights don't affect trans women. They do affect trans men. But that's great. Like, good. Someone needs to do that. It's so important. Abortion rights are so important. I would happily spend my entire life fighting for abortion rights if I wasn't fighting for my own freedoms. And if trans rights were guaranteed, I would not need to talk about trans rights ever again, and I would talk about abortion rights the rest of my life until they were guaranteed. Because obviously, I mean, any feminist should. But when describing like this huge women's vigil against misogynistic violence as like full-on TRA, like imagine if you said to your like gran or your mum, oh, do you oppose misogynistic violence? And she's like, yes, I oppose misogynistic violence. Suddenly she's a full-on TRA because she opposes violence against me. And if you oppose violence against me, then you're suddenly like a paid actor by George Soros who's like, this is so ridiculous. What is wrong with you? My goodness. Blah, blah, blah. Same old nonsense. There was something else in here which I wanted to include. People who gave money are now feeling duped when Reclaim These Streets said women's causes. They also mean trans women and women. Yeah, they mean when we donate £500,000 for women's causes against misogynistic violence, we also mean 0.3, 0.6, whatever, 0. something % of this money is going to end up helping trans women because 0. something % of the people who face misogynistic violence every single day are trans women. I just want everyone to remember this. This is my takeaway from this episode. If you oppose misogynistic violence, if that's your position, if you would stand up and say, I oppose misogynistic violence, that makes you a trans rights activist because you oppose misogynistic violence against trans women, even though it's less than 1% of the misogynistic violence. And that is too much support for trans people, for these gender critical people. That will make them not donate. They wouldn't donate £10 knowing that 3p of it goes to trans people. Wait, did I do that maths in my head right? Maybe 30p. I have had several drinks. Anyway, talking of gender critical people having literally zero fucks for women at all, do not give a shit. Here is Natalie Washington, who is a really great person and also a great advocate for trans rights, particularly in sport. I was going to say she's a good footballer, but I don't actually know if she's good at football. So Natalie, I apologise. Maybe Natalie's rubbish at football. I'm sure she's amazing at football. She plays football, and I had her on the channel before, and we discussed trans rights and Trans Day of Visibility last year. You should all follow her. She's at trans something. She said, I scrolled back 2 weeks on Fair Play for Women's timeline, and they have not mentioned anything other than anti-trans nonsense. No mention of anything during a time of enormous public conversation about women's safety. Can the media stop pretending these are women's rights groups? And this is so worth focusing on. This happens every time. Like, whenever a huge gay rights event happens, LGB Alliance, don't comment on it. Do you know Japan just ruled that banning gay marriage was unconstitutional in Japan? And this is a big deal. Japan is a very conservative country. I mean, Japan is a very interesting country, and there is a lot to say about Japan, but Japan is not good for LGBT rights. And they've just ruled that banning gay marriage isn't allowed. That doesn't mean they've legalised it. There's a whole fiasco to come, and they're going to be very slow about it because Japan is quite slow about a lot of things. And Japan is fucking terrible for trans rights. But this is a good thing. Like, Japan is a major world power. Like, such a big deal. Japan is like one, you know, with China, is the most influential country in Asia. And if Japan was to legalise gay marriage, that would be such a big deal. LGB Alliance don't give a shit. And equally, when the UK is up in arms about violence against women, misogynistic violence, it's like the topic this is the number one topic people are talking about the last week. Sarah Everard was absolutely a number one discussion in the UK. And of course, Fair Play for Women didn't talk about it because they're not a women's rights group. They're an anti-trans group. And we've got a few more things to say on Fair Play for Women before I just finish off on them. So here's a couple of old tweets from Fair Play for Women. This is like one of their famous tweets. Someone says, so they're talking about an article saying trans women may be soon able to get pregnant, claims an expert. I mean, this is one of those, like, within 20 years kind of thing that actually means who knows when. One day, trans women will be able to become pregnant. Like, medical technology is always advancing. One day that will happen. It's probably too late for me, which is quite, you know, it's sad to think it's probably too late for everyone watching this. I don't want to say that, but like, it's not soon. It's not this year. It's not next year. It's not within 5 years. It's probably not within 10 years. One day, maybe in my lifetime, a trans woman will get pregnant. I mean, cool. Like, good for her. One of my favourite tweets of all time from, like, for baiting dickheads is from Not Cursed E, who I also recommend you all follow, when she said, I want to be the first trans woman to have an abortion. And when I do, it's going to be a white person. And I have never seen people kick off so much at a tweet, apart from what I'm going to discuss later in the episode. People did not like that, and it was hilarious. Anyway, good troll. But, so anyway, someone's commenting on this article about trans women one day being able to be pregnant. This is not imminent. This is not in the 2020s. Like, it's not going to happen before 2029. If this happens before 2029, I will donate, like, you link me this fucking episode. If a trans woman gets pregnant before 2029, I will donate £1,000 to a trans rights charity. Tell me. Not in the date, you know, whatever. I'll work it out. I might come on with the excuse to donate less, but like, it'll be fine. But anyway, this person says, the day this becomes a reality is the day I stop being an organ donor. There's a whole thing about gender critical people quitting the organ donor register in the UK, which is optional. It shouldn't be optional. It should be mandatory. Everyone should have to donate their organs. I stand by that. It's not a bodily autonomy issue. Once you're dead, you do not need your organs. You could save lives. Absolutely fuck you if you don't donate your organs. You're a piece of shit if you don't donate your organs. Like, I feel very strongly about this. Loads of gender critical people remove themselves from the organ donors register on hearing, like, this. I think this is, when's this from? 2017. In 2018, there was a thing where loads of gender critical people removed themselves from an organ donor register, and absolutely a personal, from me, fuck you to every single person who's ever taken themselves off the organ donor register. If you are in the chat and you're not on the organ donor register, sign up tomorrow, and if you don't, fuck you. Anyway, Fair Play for Women said, it won't happen. Someone or other is correct. Any potential fetus would invade the host's body and proliferate like 1,000 cancers. Evil grin. What? Here is Fair Play for Women again saying, ha ha ha. Like, for anyone just listening, ha 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 ha. Like, they've written the whole full line of ha ha ha's. Good luck to them. The fetus will invade their body like a virus. Hair, laughing face. Like, taking joy at the idea of the difficulty, the medical difficulty of a trans woman being pregnant, loving the idea of a fetus killing a trans woman. Disgusting. What's wrong with you? This is, I think this is my last comment. So this Fair Play for Women this week successfully won against ONS to change the guidance on the census. Like, it's kind of meaningless in one sense and kind of important in another. Fair Play for Women are one of the most well-funded anti-trans groups in the UK. And they're very politically correct, I guess. They're very acceptable. They're very polite, and they say things in the right way. Well, they do now. They didn't in 2017. And I think they're one of the biggest threats to trans rights in the UK. We like to focus on LGB Alliance because LGB Alliance are fucking buffoons, and almost everything they say is an absolute joke. Fair Play for Women, and it used to be Women's Place UK, but less so recently, are a bigger risk because they've got this, like, we're doing women's rights angle without actually doing anything for women's rights, and not even commenting on the biggest women's rights issue probably so far of the 2020s. They didn't give a shit about women's rights. They are an anti-trans group, and they get so much money. They just raised £100,000 in a week to sue the census people to take away 5 words from the guidance. So not even from the census, from the guidance, saying that you can use your passport to tick the sex question. So I just want to say, I can say this on video because fuck you, whatever. If you're a trans person and you haven't filled in the census yet, if you're an intersex person and you haven't filled in the census yet, if you're literally anyone and you haven't filled in the census yet, and you get to the question that says sex, answer it like all of the other questions. Tick the box which most represents you. Tick the correct box. Don't be intimidated by some piece of shit anti-trans organisation into ticking the wrong box. It will mess up the data. It won't benefit anyone. It wouldn't benefit women. It wouldn't benefit trans people. It benefits no one if you tick the wrong box. Like, if you're a female person, tick female. If you're a male person, tick male. If you're non-binary, well, actually, fuck you. The government doesn't give a shit. And that's horrible. Like, I don't know. I don't know what... I honestly don't know what non-binary people are supposed to do. The government has just said, fuck you. If we ever do a census again, which we might never, maybe there'll be an option for non-binary people. But, like, I don't know. Sorry, when I say fuck you, I didn't actually mean from me. I meant fuck you from the government. Just tick the box which is right for you. Don't tick the box that Fair Play for Women wants you to tick. Like, fuck them. I'm probably getting demonetized. I've said fuck so many times. Anyway, these guys raised a lot of money over a complete nonsense issue. Trans women have ticked female on the census since, I don't know, 1841, whenever the first census was. And trans men have ticked male on the census because, of course, they have. Because every single form that they filled in since transitioning, that's what they've ticked. Because that's the right answer. That's the correct answer. That's the true answer. And it's the answer that's going to benefit people the most. If you are using women's services every single day of your life and you tick male on the census, I mean, you personally aren't going to make much difference because there are 66 million people in the UK. But if 10,000 trans women were to tick male, then women's services will lose out because there will be 10,000 trans women using women's services every day, and the government will decide that actually there are 10,000 less people that we need to fund women's services for. Everyone loses. Women lose, trans people lose, everyone loses. Anyway, tick the box that's right for you, but Fair Play for Women just managed to win this ridiculous court case, and they raised so much money. I think Fair Play for Women and Transgender Trend are raising lots of money, and I think it's so easy to attack LGB Alliance and We Are Fair Cop and all of the other, standing for women and stuff. The groups are run by idiots. These groups are run by people who are more professional. They know what they're doing. They're better at it. And I think we just need to focus on them more. This might not be a call out. This might literally be a call out for me because I don't focus on them enough. But I think it's time to start focusing on the groups that are doing the most damage to women's rights and LGBT rights. Anyway, moving on. We're now entering the brain rot section. I need like a special little siren for the brain rot mode. Like, here we are. Moving on to the brain rot section. I'm going to eat some raspberries first. Hang on. They're all soaked with alcohol now. I'm not drunk, but I've had quite a few drinks. Anyway, Satan is a transsexual. I'm genuinely pleased to hear that Satan is a transsexual, but with only one S. So I guess he's a transsexual. Satan is a transsexual. You cannot now prove. If we assume this premise is true, potentially I am Satan. You wouldn't know. Like, hail Satan. Below is a depiction of Baphomet, another name for Satan. I don't know if that's technically true or not. You'll notice that he has female breasts. From ancient times until present, Satan has always been depicted as both male and female, with both genitalia, female breasts, and a male penis. Just a little shout out to the person who made this meme. Boobs aren't genitals. Satan's nature is bisexuality, homosexuality, the confusing of different genders and mixing of the holy and with the profane. It's how he defiles people and keeps them from being able to contact with the God and live a life of sexual cleanliness and holiness. And when you see LGBT being promoted and supported on a wide scale, these are the followers of Satan bringing their God out and hiding in the light. Coming out of the closet was never meant for homosexuals. It was meant for Satan! Satan! So I'd just like to congratulate Satan on coming out as trans. He, him. Satan was obviously originally a woman, but is now a man. Deal with it. Anyway, so we commented on this little bit last episode. Graham Linehan got a article in The Independent for Ireland. Graham Linehan, how my transgender views cost me my marriage. And, I mean, a fairly flattering photo of him. I don't know. Being charitable, try and imagine yourself in a situation. Just for a minute, try and imagine yourself where you are right about something. Imagine that you are anti-racism or anti eating puppies. Like, your anti-some position is just plainly bad. You're just taking a moral ground and your wife leaves you over it. You might want to do some kind of like, I'm right. Like, if you were a celebrity, like, and the newspaper approached you like, oh, we hear that your crusade for the moral good is kicking off and we want to talk to you about it and stuff. You might say, oh, I'm so dedicated to the movement of being anti-racism that I'm prepared to lose friends and family over it. Even then, like, saying, like, I lost my wife is kind of, I don't know, there's just something about it that just seems a little bit extra. I don't know, I really genuinely feel for the lady involved in this. Imagine if, so that was just us being charitable there. Imagine a situation where your partner leaves you over because you're right. Now just imagine a situation where your partner loses their mind over a tiny issue. Like, you know, as a trans person, trans rights hugely affect my life. In at times I've considered, can I even stay in this country? You know, I've had a lot of fear over my future. But being realistic, being rational, trans rights are a small issue. They're not as big as race. They're not as big as women's rights. They're not as big as gay rights. It's just a smaller issue. There's less of us. Imagine if your spouse lost their mind over some kind of tiny rights issue. And then not only did they, like, you lost them to this. They went off the rails over some niche nonsense. They then published themselves in a mainstream newspaper explaining why they chose their stupid, ridiculous, irrational garbage over you. Like, it's just horrible. I don't know what position she takes on trans rights. Maybe she's even anti-trans rights. But if she is, it doesn't matter. I still have some sympathy for her in this position because it's just horrible. I wouldn't want anyone to go through this. Like, for anything. It's not nice. Anyway, here is Citizen Go. So this isn't an organisation we've covered before. So gender critical people make absolutely shitloads of organisations. I don't know if you noticed, but like earlier we talked about Hackney Resistors, who are probably just one single person. There are gender critical people make so many organisations. If you look at the International Women's Declaration, which is like we want to ban all trans people from the toilets thing that you can sign, loads of organisations have signed it, and loads of them are things called Women's Rights Basingstoke and stuff like that, where it's like, you know, just clearly just one person in their hometown. But Citizen Go are a slightly bigger one that we haven't really covered before. They're actually international. I think they started in Spain, but this is the UK branch. And the UK branch is run by gender critical activist Caroline Farrow, who is also a very conservative Catholic Christian. Somehow she has respect in the gender critical movement, despite being like, I think she's anti-abortion, she's anti-gay marriage. And here is, she's the director of campaigns. I'm not sure her official title. This is related to the gender critical movement. They're trying to ban the Cadbury's Cream Egg advert. The Cadbury's Cream Egg advert has two men kissing, but with a Cadbury's Cream Egg in their mouth. Like, cool. All right, whatever, who cares? You know, oh, I've got hiccups. They're in a rage about this because, you know, all anti-LGBT people are in a rage every time men kiss each other. I think it's just worth pointing out that this is a well-funded international gender critical organisation that is explicitly against, gay men kissing. And it's just always worth pointing out that anti-trans stuff always leads to anti-gay stuff. Always. Always, always, always. I really cannot emphasise that enough. If there was a Cadbury's Cream Egg advert with a trans person, they would all be protesting. But this group, you know, and the more sort of anti-LGBT in general end of things, is of course protesting against cream egg adverts. Anyway, sorry, here's Poppy. Onwards. We're entering the proper brain rot zone now. The transgender cult, the promotion of drag shows, the redefining of marriage, the denying of sexual difference. These are all assaults on women and female identity. They're entirely anti-feminist. This is a man, by the way. This is a man trying to claim that redefining marriage, i.e. aka gay marriage, aka women being allowed to marry women, some random shit man is claiming with 300 likes that this is an attack on women. Like, just picking up the gender critical rhetoric of LGBT rights or attack on attack on women and just placing it straight into anti-gay rights, because like this is how they work. This is their standard thing. Ever since the 80s, they've been saying, and beyond, 70s, 60s, probably forever, they've been saying gay people being allowed to kiss is opposing women's rights somehow. You know, think of the women, think of the children as a standard LGBT argument that we see over and over again. And here it is, very explicitly, the transgender cult, the promotion of drag shows, redefining marriage, denial of sexual difference, these are assaults on women. None of that is, like, I mean, I don't know what the transgender cult is. Maybe some little cult of 5 people somewhere is an assault on women, who knows. But the promotion of drag shows, like, I don't know, it's just nonsense. I just think it's worth pointing out this kind of crap, because it's so easy to take this, we're defending women, and that's why we oppose trans rights, and just picking it up and just extend it a little bit and putting it back where you were. We're not just opposing trans rights, we're opposing trans rights, drag queens, gay marriage, denial of sexual difference. Definitely worth pointing this out. Denial of sexual difference to a lot of people today will mean it would be a comment on trans people. But for the classic conservative knobheads who are pushing the sort of biblical worldview or the very traditional worldview, that denial of sexual difference is just an anti-feminist comment about how, you know, women are more suited to the home, women are more suited to not having jobs and raising the children. And it allows you to fly under the radar today, because if you said, I don't deny the difference between men and women, that sounds like, oh, that means we need to oppose trans women in sports. But to this person who has already mentioned trans people, and is now mentioning a second thing, is almost certainly opposing the feminist idea that men and women should be able to do the same things. I'm calling it, that's what this person's saying. And then they're claiming they're anti-feminist. This, like, in the UK, like, less so in America, but in the UK, you can just push squarely anti-feminist views, like opposing gay marriage. Opposing gay marriage and feminism are absolutely opposed in every single sense. But here there's someone who is able to just pick that up and claim it's anti-feminist, and people will buy that because of the gender critical movement, who have managed to sell the idea that a feminist position is about treating women like, you know, biologically inferior. Garbage. I'm actually a little bit more drunk than I planned. So here is one of our old friends, Ray Blanchard, who, and pretty much every trans person who's been out for more than 5 minutes has heard of Ray Blanchard. He's famous for coming up with this autogynephile versus homosexual transsexual distinction of trans people. You're either a gay man who is so gay that they want to be a woman for some reason, or you're a pervert who has some weird fetish for being a woman. That's the only 2 options for trans people. Trans men don't exist. Don't ask me any more questions. No, it doesn't matter if you don't fit, because one of the key features of autogynephiles is that you lie. So my theory is unfalsifiable. But anyway, here is a Ray Blanchard comment I thought that was funny this week. For some autogynephiles, that is, lesbian or bisexual trans women, for some lesbian or bisexual trans women, the prospect of being slut-shamed is aspirational. Just love it, mate. Like, there's nothing a trans woman loves more than getting sexual harassment. When you get sexually harassed as a trans woman, you're like, oh, well, At least they thought I was a woman. I'm just loving this. I just love it. One of my favourite things is when a load of angry men, this is about to come up as a theme, a load of angry men come into my DMs and call me a whore. Like, I'm just like, oh, at least they think I'm a woman. Garbage. Ridiculous position. Here's a good one. Cis men and women. So you know this person, like they probably aren't gender critical. They're probably who knows, 4chan person, men's rights activist. Cis men and women have a right to know if a man or woman they are involved with is cis. Also, so are trans men and women going to get a microchip fitted during their transition surgery so that their birth sex can be identified? They should do, as it is our right to know. What are you on about? There's so much ridiculousness. A lot of cis people genuinely think that you're like, I'm a trans person, I'm going to have one surgery, and suddenly my transition is finished. It's like, pow, I have transitioned now. It's like transition is a verb that you can do over a weekend. So during your transition surgery, transition in quotes, of course, during your transition surgery, like, I mean, for some people, transition surgeries is like 7 different surgeries. And for some people, there's no surgeries. But are trans men and women going to get a microchip fitted? No, they're not. I mean, I sure flipping hope no one installed a microchip in my vagina when it happened. But then what would you do? You have some kind of microchip reader. You're like, oh, I find you very sexy, and I've been kissing you all night, and I bought you several drinks, and now we're back at my place. I just have this vagina scanner. I just have this little device, and I just need to run it past you just to make sure that you don't have a microchip that says that you're a trans man. What do you want about, mate? I'm like, to be honest, if you want to write an app for your phone that detects a microchip, and every single person you bring home, you just want to run it past their genitals, like, feel free. What you could save a bit of time if you just say, when you meet someone, when you first say, hey, would you like a drink? You could also just tack on the end, hey, would you like a drink? But just so you know, I have an irrational prejudice against trans people. So if you're trans, I don't want to buy you a drink. Just say that, because you will filter out all of the trans people. I mean, you might accidentally filter out some other people, but I just think you should also, it's just you don't want to deceive anyone. I think maybe what would be better is if we microchipped all of the transphobic people, because I think there's probably less people who think that trans people should be microchipped than there are trans people. So it'd be cheaper for society on the whole. So, perhaps maybe you could get a microchip. Maybe. Right. I don't know what's the time. We're doing pretty well. I think we're doing okay for time. I started late. Anyway, so here is my lovely friend, Jimmy Snow. If you don't follow him on YouTube, you really should. He has a really great channel, and it's he also runs The Line, which is where my newest show, called Transatlantic, where you can call in if you have any issues, questions, arguments, anything about trans people. You can call into Transatlantic and discuss them with us. That's going to be tomorrow at 11 p.m. UK time. That's like 4 p.m. MST, 5 p.m. Texas time. I can't remember Central time. I don't know. America has so many time zones. Anyway, Jimmy Snow says, Jimmy, I usually agree with you, but I really want to keep my bigotry against trans people. This is a summary of lots of comments after yesterday's video. So Jimmy is great, full stop, but he's also a trans ally. So he does a lot of good videos about LGBT content. He is a cis man. He's pansexual. Anyway, even though I just recommend you follow him. But anyway, someone replies, so you have to agree with every single idea from a trans, no matter how detached from reality or be branded a bigot, you're sounding an awful lot like a fundy. Like, what an embarrassing straw man. You know, if you... Just imagine, if Jimmy said, you have to agree with every single idea from trans, as if trans is like a noun covering all trans people, I don't know. If you have to agree with every single idea from trans, and I would just like to say, as the representative for all trans people, you now have to agree. You have to agree. This is the law. This is the law for trans people. You have to dislike mayonnaise. You have to like technical death metal. You have to like traveling to Cambodia. It's your favorite country. You also have to like what else do I like? You have to like these scissors because they've got like a rainbow pattern on them. Like you actually have to. That's the law. And if you don't, you're a transphobe. That's not only is that what I've literally said, that is literally what I meant. I just such a ridiculous position. This is such a... The reason I included this is because this is such a typical position from a transphobic person. You're like, mate, don't hate on trans people. That makes you a transphobe. And they're like, what? So I suddenly have to agree with everything you say? Like, no, you don't have to agree with anything I say. You can literally think what you want, mate. But if you disagree that trans people are normal people or that they deserve basic human rights, then I'm going to call you a transphobe. And the reason I'm going to call you a transphobe is because you're a transphobe. Like, if you don't want to be called transphobic, then just don't be it. Like, there's no problem. If I say, like, Canada is the best country for progressive metal, including Archspire and Protest the Hero and Cryptopsy, like, if you don't agree with that, that doesn't make you transphobic because they aren't opinions on trans people. You don't have to agree with everything a trans person says. What you have to agree with is literally nothing. Unless you care about not being transphobic, then you have to agree that trans people deserve the same rights as everyone else. You know, otherwise you will be accused. And that will be literally the full extent of your comeuppance. The retribution against you will be people calling you transphobic. Like, oh no. Like, just stop being shit. So this one, I genuinely could not believe that someone linked this to me. So I just like to say, so this person has TERF in their name. They've also got the straight pride. Oh no, not straight pride. The super straight pride. Colours, the orange and black. This person has also been quote tweeting me and replying to me for like months now. They're one of my hate followers. And they've linked me this image saying, if trans women are women, then why do they want trans rights? I just, can you... So I think most people's response to this will be just replacing the word trans for something else. If tall women are women, then why do they want tall rights? I don't know, maybe that doesn't make sense. If gay women are women, then why do they want gay rights? If black women are women, why do they want black rights? Like, because they're not just the concept of women. They are also another group. Like, everyone should have the same rights. And when you say, I want trans rights, that means you're saying trans people currently don't have the same rights as cis people, and I think they should be equal. If you said, I'm a gay woman and I want gay rights, you would say gay people do not currently have the same rights as straight people. If you were a black woman, you'd say black women do not currently have the same rights as white women. I mean, tall was a really bad example, and I'm kind of annoyed that Drunk Me decided to pick that first. But like, in a hypothetical world where tall people were discriminated against, then you could want tall rights at the same time as wanting women's rights, because as a woman and a trans person, or as a woman and a gay person, then two different types of prejudice affect you, obviously. So to come out with, if you're a, like, if you're these two things, how come you want rights for both of the two things that you are? Like, I just can't believe that people, like, imagine seeing this and think it was some like kind of slam dunk. To be honest, I do like the picture they've included of like a seagull having its beak held shut. I mean, to be honest, good luck doing that to a seagull. I think it would probably have you. In Bristol, the seagulls are like waist high. Like, if you started on a seagull, it would finish you. So be careful. But I genuinely cannot understand people whose like logical ability to just run basic arguments through their mind. Like, how do you get to this position? I don't think that this person is, incapable of this level of reasoning. This level, like, super basic level of reasoning. I just think that transphobia has rotted their brain to the point where even in the most obvious situations where you'll say something like 1 + 1 is 2, they'll have an issue with it because it's pro-trans, and it doesn't matter if there's no logical reason for their opposition. If trans women are women, then why do they want trans rights? It's because they're also trans. Another completely ridiculous argument. Cis is a slur in the same way that tranny, the N-word, or homo are also slurs. If the person it is directed at, whether they use it themselves or not, feel it is used as a slur, then it is abusive. That's how it works. That's not quite how it works, actually, mate. Like, for sure, if we just pick a word, a random, like, what have I got here? Let's go back to my cool scissors with my rainbow flag sheen. If you called me scissors, scissors isn't a slur. There's absolutely no historical, usage of calling me or people like me scissors. If you called it to me personally for months and months and we worked together and you called it to me every single time that we spoke, it could be harassment, even though it doesn't have any meaning behind it. But if scissors had been used as a word for hundreds or maybe even thousands of years to describe people like me who specifically have a characteristic that I share with them, then it could be a slur. Like, for example, tranny or homo or the N-word are all words that have been used against whole groups of people for a long time, hundreds of years plus, to justify dehumanizing them and taking away their rights. And the word cis hasn't. The word cis has only kind of been in regular use for like 100 years. Well, not regular use. The word cis has only been in academic use for 100 years, and it's only been in regular use for about 20 years. And it's not a slur, it's just a description of people who aren't trans people. It's so ridiculous. They are so desperate to be oppressed. They're so desperate to say, like, everyone wants their own N-word because, I say you don't know. I don't know. I don't know why people are desperate for their own N-word. I'm not desperate for one. When people call me a tranny, I think it's disgusting, but it's not quite the same as the N-word. Like, just fuck off. I don't know. And it's so pathetic. It is so pathetic to be offended by the word cis. I'm sure you all know. Anyway, sorry. Right, we'll move on. So, Elliot Page was on the front cover of Time magazine this week, which was exciting. I accidentally cut off his head here. Sorry, Elliot. So Elliot says, I am fully who I am. Actor Elliot Page and the fight for trans equality. So, since Elliot came out, he's been very good. Like, everything, he's been very on it. I'm going to sneeze. Sorry, everyone. Anyway, Elliot Page has been great. Elliot Page is a very famous actor from the USA. and has been talking about trans people from the past who have led the way for him, trans people today who he looks up to, and trans people in the future who he is fighting for. Like, a great message. I just thought this comment here, like, of course there are loads of angry people about Elliot Page, and we've actually covered when he first came out before in a previous episode about how the gender critical people feel like somehow they're owed his genitals and they're owed his, I don't know, his like status as a lesbian woman, which he used to be before, or a bisexual woman. They feel like deserving of that. They have this kind of like ownership over trans men who transition. They're like, you're a loss to me personally when you come out. It's kind of weird. But I just thought it's worth highlighting this comment because this is someone who's making a very classic gender critical argument that they usually make about women, but kind of upside down. So this person says, there are innumerable hardships and choices to be made that come with navigating the journey from boyhood to manhood that Elliot did not have to endure. And this is the kind of comment that as a trans woman I get like daily from gender critical people. It's very common to have people say to you, you can't be a woman because, you know, you weren't sexually harassed when you were 11. As if, like, for sure, like, with these things, and also with men, it's worth acknowledging the hardships that people go through at ages that you didn't have to experience. I, as a trans woman who came out at 25, never firsthand understood, felt what it was like to have some creepy 40-year-old man say some sexual comment about me as like an 11-year-old. I never had that. And I can listen to women who did have that, and I can read about it, and I can understand it, and I can empathise with it, but I can never know it firsthand. Like that's the fact of me as someone who came out at 25. Someone who came out at 4, they will know that. Like almost inevitably they will know that. It's not something exclusive to cis women, but it's something that I as a trans woman who came out at 25 will never know. And that's just a worthwhile point to mention sometimes. If I was in a situation with a group of women and we were talking about misogynistic sexism we experience in our lives, I could mention a lot of things. I've been sexually assaulted quite a lot of times. I've faced misogyny literally every day, and we're about to see some of that before the end of the show. Don't worry, we're nearly in the end. But I couldn't say what it was like to be sexually assaulted at 11, and I think unfortunately quite a lot of cis women will be able to say that. Some trans women will be able to say that too. But to try and make this claim about you can't be a real woman, you can't be a real man unless you've done these things is ridiculous, because firstly, not every single woman does face that. Secondly, that isn't the defining thing of what being a man or a woman is. And if it was, then some trans men would be men and some trans women would be women. And also, like, why is that important? Like, as a trans man who came out, I don't know how old he is when he came out. I have no idea how old Elliot is. But, like, he did still experience hardships, both as a person growing up and probably faced misogynistic sexism growing up as a trans man who didn't come out until... I mean, he's at least an adult. And also the pressure on trans people, the disgusting, horrific, constant transphobic bullshit from the entire of society, your entire life as you grow up. If anyone wants to know more about that, my last edited video, I'm a trans woman and I used to be transphobic. Check it out. I mention that quite a lot. Anyway, it's just... This is a gender critical comment flipped upside down about men. It's just interesting watching people do that because there's often a lot of focus around women. And then when trans men come out, there's a lot of focus around like the betrayal of women and like, oh, I used to find you attractive and now I'm offended. But to take their like idea about why trans women are invalid and to use it on trans men, like, who does this appeal to? Who can make these arguments? It's worth just seeing it play out. This was a comment from YouTube. I'm going to read this exactly how it says. I mean, I have the B, big brain, and I can tell you when someone is trans, just don't do it because it would make people mad. I very much believe you. I'm sure you can always clock every single trans person and you just don't do it because you don't want to. I'm sure you could lift up the school, but you just don't do it because, yeah, whatever, mate. It's embarrassing. Why do people say this? So the term for this is actually called the Toupee Fallacy and it has its own Wikipedia article. The Toupee Fallacy is when you say, I can always tell someone who has their own hair or whether they have a toupee because every single time I see someone with the toupee, I notice it. But obviously, you don't notice people who have a toupee that you don't notice. And it's the same with clocking trans people. Anyway. Oh, gosh. Mate, okay, we've got a couple more to go. I'll speed up a little. So, this guy had a few comments in a row. I think we've got 3 of his comments. So I've said, hating trans people isn't a woman's cause. You are a perfect example of how transphobia hurts all women. And he said, oh, would you please define the word women without referencing biology? A coherent debate requires the terms used to have consistent meaning to avoid the statements becoming meaningless and babbling. Like this is a classic gender critical move to try and you'll say something like, women face misogyny and we should be opposed to misogyny. That's why I oppose this misogynistic action. They'd be like, define women. Like, I understand that when we're talking about the grey areas between, when someone is transitioning, at what point they start facing misogyny, there's a discussion to be had there. But when I say, some trans women face misogyny, that's just a fact. We don't need any definition of woman that defines those people as not women is obviously nonsense because then it no longer predicts who faces misogyny. It no longer predicts who is attractive to people who are attracted to women. It no longer predicts how people navigate through society. This is just an attempt to derail the conversation. But this person got more and more ridiculous as it went on. His comment, the narrative, for example, is that a claim of trans women are men is transphobic. It is. However, trans women are women is okay. It is. This defines the right of someone to their own beliefs as to what constitutes a woman. It violates the mental integrity of heterosexuals. So this guy is obviously super straight. I really hope super straight becomes an actual slur. That'd be hilarious. I don't know. Don't think we need to say much about this. Violates the mental integrity of heterosexuals. What that translates to is sometimes I'm attracted to trans women and then I feel bad because I'm a homophobe. Oh. And then this is my favourite. I said plenty of women. So this knobhead has tried to define a woman as someone who gives birth. And I said plenty of women don't carry offspring. I mean, that's probably his direct quote, carry offspring. We're talking about who to protect from misogynistic sexism and sexual violence. The answer is anyone who faces misogynistic sexism and sexual violence, not anyone who can get pregnant. Because obviously the people who we need to protect from misogyny are the people who face misogyny, not some subset of them. Then they've said... Right, so there's not much punctuation here. I'm going to try and read this out how they've said it. And let's just see if you can just take this on board. Maybe close your eyes for a second and just see if you can take this in. The scientific definition does not depend on the notion that there are errors that prevent implementation of some of the facet of the species type from occurring. For example, chopping of a hand coded not negative that the person is still male or female. Slam dunk. I am now a gender critical person. Because that very compelling argument. I know actually what he's trying to say here. I've spent so long arguing with gender critical people that I know what he's trying to say. He's trying to say... There's so many layers to this. He is trying to say if someone is born with 9 fingers, that doesn't mean they aren't human, even if we say humans have 10 fingers. And that is correct. Unfortunately, that is an argument against the gender critical position. And the reason that this isn't me strawmanning him saying that, is because this failure, this gender critical self-own is so common that I see it honestly almost once a day. I would say 4 times a week I see someone say trans women aren't women because they don't have XX chromosomes. Then they say, for example, we wouldn't say like a human isn't a human just because they have 9 fingers. I just do not know how they can't see how this is a counter argument to their own position. We're saying someone is not excluded from the group A because they don't meet criteria X. Then they say we're excluding people from the group A because they don't meet criteria X. They're like these are contradictory arguments. It's just such nonsense. This is the argument he's trying to make. He's trying to say something like, he says, you're only a woman if you can give birth. And then I say, well, some women can't give birth. And then he's like, you're not suddenly a woman just because you can't give birth. I'm like, mate, that is literally your definition that you provided. And you know it's garbage because, of course, not all women can give birth. And then they're like, no, that just because someone's born with 9 fingers, it doesn't mean they're not a human. Like, yes, that is my argument. Just because someone is born incapable of giving birth to someone doesn't mean they're not a woman. That's a counter to your argument. You're an idiot. Fuck off. Anyway, right, last few tweets. Predatory men do not abduct, rape, and murder trans women. They know what they want, and it is a woman. Real statistics prove over and over again trans is the safest social category in the UK. So maybe be happy about that and stop trying to get the best victim award. This is such a classic gender... 315 likes. This is such a classic gender critical argument, position, thing to think. The idea that, well, first of all, that men like magically abduct only cis women, and they're like, oh, driving along, they're like, oh, we better abduct that woman, and then they grab her and they put a bag on her head and they duct tape her hands, and they're like, oi, excuse me, love, what's your original birth certificate? And she's like, male. And they're like, oh, cool, right, we'll let you go. Like, total garbage. Doesn't make any sense at all. Then they lean back to statistics, which, you know, it's good to lean on statistics. Statistics is much better to look at the statistics than it is to pass off a few anecdotes as if they are, you know, a worthwhile data set. But the issue here is that as feminists, we already know that women underreport crime because of misogyny in the police force. Like, we've been discussing this entire episode. Like, it's something like, what was it like? Oh, I can't even actually remember. A low percentage of rapes are reported, despite the fact that rape is like a horrifically common crime. Sexual assaults is even worse. The amount of people who report them is very low compared to the number of people who experience them. And it's the same with trans crimes. I mean, why would trans people report crimes if they fear the police and they don't want to deal with like transphobia from the police? There are whole groups on Twitter. There are like these hate groups which are like, we're the policemen who are transphobic. Like, when there are actual organised hate groups run by the police who are transphobic, no wonder trans people don't trust you. I don't want to tell trans people who are watching to not trust the police. I just think use your own judgment. But it's understandable that some don't. And it's understandable that also not only do trans people not trust the police or anyone recording statistics, some people are transphobic. So when you say, I'm a trans person and I've experienced transphobic hate crime, they don't care. I've had that personally myself. You tell someone and they're like, I've also had that with misogyny. When I got upskirted by some creepy loser in the pub, I went and told the bouncers and I said, a man just took a photo up my skirt and also up the skirt of 2 of my friends, who were both cis women. And 2 bouncers looked at me and they literally looked me right in the eye and said, what do you want me to do about it? And I was like, well, kick them out. And they were like, disgusting. When I went back in, my 2 cis women friends had attacked this man. I mean, to be honest, totally justified. Wrestled his phone off of him and deleted all of his photos. Quite satisfying. Anyway, what was I ranting about? Total nonsense. The idea that men don't kill trans women or abduct them or rape them, murder them is just plainly false. I mean, it's false even just when you consider the reality of the fact that some trans women pass. Obviously, trans women are abducted when women are targeted. But also, it's just plainly false when you do any kind of feminist analysis on it at all. But this is very common. It's a very common gender-critical position that trans people are somehow magically safer than cis people. They have to position you like this. In order to justify taking away your rights, they have to try and spin you as more privileged than them. And it's kind of ironic when they're talking about Best Victim Award, like, that's literally what they're doing. Talking of desperate to be oppressed, here is the Women's Inequalities Committee saying, today we will be continuing our inquiry into the reform of the Gender Recognition Act. Yes, they are still dragging this out, and they're going to be dragging this out probably for the entire of this year, possibly into next year. They said, we are hearing from Stonewall, Mermaids, the Beaumont Society, and Gyres UK. So this is the reform of a law that only affects trans people. And we are talking to 4 charities, 3 of which were LGBT charities, and one of which is a trans charity. Good. I mean, they've talked to anti-trans groups. They've had anti-trans academics in Parliament who allegedly plagiarised their entire report. They've talked to everyone. They did a consultation in which every single gender critical person in the entire country replied, which was about 20,000 people, which was only 20% of the replies. They're talking to everyone. It's just uncontroversial. I might not like the fact that they're talking to the anti-trans people, but they are. And to be honest, they do need to talk to everyone. Maybe the anti-trans people are right. They're not, and that's why they can't provide any good arguments, and that's why their entire reports are allegedly plagiarized from a single study from the 80s. Anyway, this person actually featured in the last 2 episodes with a different emoji. Totally shit person. Their account has been around for absolute ages. They have thousands of followers, and they have said the Women's Inequalities Committee, talking to trans and LGBT charities about a law that affects trans people, they've said, this is their genuine opinion, with nearly 100 likes. They've said, this is like asking the Ku Klux Klan to advise you on anti-racism policies. Where are the groups representing women? Why does your consultee group exclude them? Actual state of the gender critical movement. Here's a law about trans people that only affects trans people, and somehow asking them about their own rights. Just worth pointing out that all 4 of these organisations are led by cis people. Not one single one of these organisations is led by a trans person. None of them. Not even Mermaids, who are a trans charity. They're run by a cis woman. All of those organisations are great and they do good work, but none of them are run by a trans person. And when they're discussing trans rights, they did have some trans people to speak about this, but the vast majority of people who have talked about trans rights in Parliament have been cis people. And most of them have been women. In fact, Mermaids is run by a woman. The other groups all heavily focus women too. Loads of women have spoken. In fact, when they had their discussion the other day, they had 3 trans women and 3 cis women, and the 3 cis women, who are all gender critical, gave an absolutely garbage attempt at a report. One of them, allegedly, 40% according to Turnitin, which is a software to detect plagiarism, plagiarised their report, which we covered in a previous episode. And apparently trans people, not even trans people, talking about trans rights is like the Ku Klux Klan discussing racism policies. It's a disgusting comment. What's wrong with you? Absolute brain rot. If this was fair, this would be discussed exclusively by trans people and women, and it would be, seeing as this doesn't actually affect women, we would hear from the transphobic people, transphobic women who have issues with trans people being allowed to get married without getting a certificate and trans people being allowed to die without getting a certificate. We'd hear for them. We would hear all of their concerns, and we would just compare them and listen to them and decide whether they're rational. They're not. And then we would talk to loads of trans people and see the best way to reform this law in order to actually help people. Bearing in mind that there are 66 million people in the UK and something like 0.6% of them are trans, and only 5,000 people since 2004 have got a certificate from this law. So this law obviously doesn't work, obviously doesn't do what it's supposed to do. But apparently that's like getting the famously most racist group in the world to discuss race issues. Disgusting. Do you know the closest thing that's ever come to this, but still not quite as grim as this, is when they had Transgender Trend in to talk about this. Transgender Trend, the group that proposes being trans as a trend, to discuss these things. What are you on about? Disgusting person. Like, Darvo to the point of ridiculous. Anyway, the reason trans women would want to use a women's only gym is the same reason that a cis woman would. Why should trans women have to deal with misogynistic pervy men? Why are trans women second-class citizens? That's from me. Someone has then said, males are the dominant group in society. Females having the right does not make males second-class citizens. I probably should have left this tweet for another episode, but I know I never would have got to it if I did. This is such a ridiculous example of gender-critical ideology in action. If you just declare that cis men are males and trans women are males and they're all the same, then you can say males are the dominant group in society because cis men are the dominant group in society. And then you can just throw away the concept of transphobia. You can throw away the misogyny that trans women face, and you can just say they're the dominant group. This person is just trying, this is such a pathetic sleight of hand, saying trans women are somehow the dominant group in society. For sure, I've been sexually assaulted 10 times. I don't know. I literally have lost count. And I've only been out for 5 years. 6 years, I don't know. I worry about my own access to healthcare. There was 2 whole months last year where I didn't have any access to trans healthcare. I'm worrying about my future in this country, and somehow I'm the dominant group in society as a trans woman, literally fighting for my own freedoms and rights. And the reason that they're able to make this ridiculous claim is they can just say, oh, well, you've all got the same birth sex. And that's as far as my analysis goes. I'm literally only categorizing people by the genitals they had as a baby. And I'm going to use that to decide all of the sexism they face, all of what everyone who finds them attractive, how they navigate society, what oppression they face. Ridiculous. I feel like this tweet, I could do an entire episode on this tweet, but I'm just going to move on because I know we're near the end. And I know we've gone on a little bit, and I know we started late, so thank you for everyone sticking with me. I no longer believe that trans women feel unsafe in men's rooms. I mean, you can just apparently not believe whatever you want, mate. I no longer believe that green exists. I mean, I've just declared that. Who cares? It doesn't matter if I've got no evidence, because all my opinions are valid. When I've asked for the term for men who harass them into using women's safe spaces, they have no idea what I mean. I don't know what you mean. It turns out it's only a valid question of affirmation/validation. They are not scared. I mean, trivially bullshit. Trans women are sexually assaulted, face misogynistic sexual violence, the same as cis women, because people aren't magic. Like, fuck off. Ridiculous. Right. So we're on our final piece now. And I just wanted to cover this. So this isn't trans rights stuff. last week, someone made some shitty joke saying, I'm not sexist. Being sexist is wrong, and being wrong is for women. Shitty joke. They got 50,000 likes for it. I mean, like, so what? Like, it's not a big deal. And then I said, looks like being funny is for women too. Like, clearly they're trying to make a joke. I mean, people liked it. I didn't laugh, but okay. That's because I'm a feminazi. But anyway, I also made a joke. And, like, I don't know if you can see here, but the original guy got 400 replies, and I got 700. Almost all of the replies I got were, sexist. Almost all of them were, women can't be funny, women are all sluts. Like, honestly, like 10% of the replies were just people just writing Amy Schumer, as if that is evidence alone that not only am I wrong, but my joke isn't funny. Whatever. I did, like, I thought it was funny. I replied to this for like a whole day. Like most of the, not most, but like I replied to hundreds of these people because it's hilarious, because they're so offended by the idea of a woman making a joke about a man. Like, they're so offended by that. So insecure. The whole position in the world is based on this concept, and they really did not like this. Like 700 replies and quote tweets and stuff. The people who they were fucking furious at this. I got a couple of rape threats from this, like, not that serious credible rape threats, but just like casual, like, oh, I'll fucking rape you, whatever. I got sent some dick pics over it. Anyway, that was I think it was last week. This is 4 days ago. It was, I don't know, my brain is rotted. It was a while ago. But yesterday I saw someone had said, feminism started for me when I was 8, and I used to buy Yorkie bars from the shop as my Friday night treat. But I thought they were illegal to buy as a girl, so I bought them for myself, and I thought the shop lady and myself were part of a spy gang, I don't know, breaking the law, whatever. And I said, for anyone not from the UK in the 90s, we had a chocolate bar, and the advertising was literally, this is not for girls. I remember being disgusted by it at the time, and just couldn't believe that anyone else was okay with it. I've never bought one. And this was a throwaway comment. I saw her tweet, her original tweet. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. When I was little, like, I'm not sure when this started, but like, definitely in secondary school, I very vividly remember in like year 7 or year 8, when I was like 11 or 12, some of the boys in my class buying them and teasing the girls over them, and just thinking like, what is this? How is this allowed? This is nonsense, garbage. But like, it's not a big deal. Like, it's an advert from the 2000s, 90s, I don't know. It turns out that they finished this in 2011. Alright? Like, I just wrote this tweet thing like, did you know we used to have this garbage? Anyway, moving on. I'm not actually quite sure. I don't know if you can see the numbers here. But this offended a certain section of the world so much. I got nearly 7,000 replies and over 5,000 quote tweets. And people were fucking raging. Like, this is like, I got basically 10,000 people furious at the fact that when I was 11, I was upset by it's not for girls. Just bear in mind that I'm a trans woman, and I didn't come out to when I was 25. I wasn't and didn't consider myself a girl when I was 11 or 12. But I was very, as a closet trans person, I was very furious about the idea that men and women were treated unequally. I was so angry about that particularly when I was a teenager. I guess I'm angry about it now, but I think, I didn't quite understand the world as much, and I just couldn't empathise with anyone at all who treated women and men differently. And I just remember being disgusted by this, and I remember being disgusted about some of the boys in my class using it as some kind of leverage over the girls. But, just to be clear, I was like 11, and this finished in 2011 when I was 20, but I totally forgot about it by then. Like, I hadn't thought about this for fucking ages. Anyway, saw it, made a comment. People fucking flipped out. I didn't actually look at who quote tweeted. I know Julie Hartley-Brewer got on it. I presume that like all of the reactionary crew got on it. I got so many hateful DMs off this. I got rape threats. I got people calling me a whore. Like, I got sent the most disgusting dick pic that I've ever seen in my life. I got sent a variety of dick pics. I got like every single thing you can imagine. I got sent in the last 24 hours over this tweet of me saying, when I was 11, I didn't like this advert, which is plainly misogynistic. I mean, like, this isn't a debate. Like, you cannot like my opinion of saying, like, I didn't like this when I was little. Like, you know, you can be offended by that, but it is literally just factually misogynistic. That's the whole point. I know that it's a joke, but the joke is built on misogyny. That's the whole point. And I got so many people messaging me like, oh, you can't even take a joke. Like, I understand the joke, mate. Can you explain the joke to me? And I literally I've probably got like 50 or more DMs over this. I replied to most of them because I'm an idiot. And people are like, oh, you can't even take a joke. And I'm like, well, what's the joke? And they're like, and I'm like, yeah, well, what's the joke? What's the joke? And they're like, oh, you want me to just say that the joke is women are too weak to eat this? And I'm like, yeah, that's the point, mate. You don't need to be so offended over it. Like, when I was 11, I was a little bit angry about this, but I wasn't so angry that like I had to hunt down people and send them angry DMs calling them a whore. I didn't ever send my own genitals to someone because I was so angry that someone had said this advert from the 10 years ago was misogynistic. I mean, it is misogynistic. That isn't my opinion. That's just literally, that's how it works. Whether you think it's good or not, whether you think this is a funny joke or not, it doesn't really matter. The only reason the joke works is because of misogyny. And that's just, that's the fact. That's literally the foundation of it. So there's no point being offended over it. If I say this is misogynistic, you can be like, yeah, but I found it funny. Okay, all right. Or you can say, like, oh, you shouldn't be so upset over misogyny. And I can say, well, okay, like, if you don't think misogyny is upsetting, that's fine. Like, I mean, if you can just go to say to your girlfriend, I don't think misogyny is upsetting. Like, see how it goes. I'm sure there are loads of people who are fussed by that. But the amount that people were offended by this was, I'm kind of shocked how, kind of how the Twitter algorithm works. Sometimes things blow up and sometimes things don't. And this lady's tweet, like, she got like 80,000 likes on hers, but only a couple of thousand comments. So she had a very good ratio, and I got like probably ratioed here. It's weird that this is how it went, but like, whatever. It's just kind of how Twitter works, isn't it? I remember reading this comment a while ago saying, every day Twitter has a main character and the goal of your life is to not be the main character. And I feel like in a little corner of the UK, I think we got to number 9 at trending at one point. I was the main character. It's kind of grim. You know, I got like literally 10,000 people calling me a whore for saying that an advert from 10 years ago was misogynistic, which it, like, no, quite obviously is. People, they just could not handle it. And I'd just like to make a comment as well about how pretty much every single person who DM'd me over this, like probably less than 100, probably more than 50, they all had football profile pictures. Every single one. Every single one of them was a man. Didn't get any comments from women. I got lots of quote tweets from women saying like, oh, you know, I'm one of the good ones, whatever. It's not, like, I was just shocked at how big a deal people made over this. Like, this isn't a big deal. So what? Like, who cares? Anyway, of course, the gender criticals also got in on this. Look at this one. So this is from our friend James Dreyfus. James Dreyfus. So he's put a picture of my tweet and then he's put a picture of someone else. I don't know who this person is. Who says, I wrote a complaint to Nestle at the time, so I presume they were an adult at the time. I got a sorry for your behaviour, sorry if you're offended type response. Not surprised by it. And he's laughing at it. I don't know. These people are meant to allegedly be defending women, but not when a trans person is calling out misogyny. Then you have to attack them over it. 1,400 likes. Like, people were so angry about this. I can't believe how angry people are about this. It's like... I don't know. It is an interesting experience. The next one's the last tweet, but like, I've got a lot of abuse of this. I actually think that quite possibly now that I'm going to be Yorkie girl, which is quite funny. I guess a few comments I'd like to make are, one, it's not very nice when you have 10,000 people calling you names because they're offended over your opinion about misogyny. Two, gender critical people literally do not give a fuck about misogyny and they will go all in on anything when trans people are getting a pile on. And three, when you say trans women don't face misogyny and they get a 10,000 person per pylon, being like every single comment I got was misogynistic, like all of them. You can just go. Actually, I kind of wussed out. I decided I wasn't going to delete this tweet, and then just before this show, I looked at it and I had 8 new DMs, which had all happened within like 10 minutes of each other. Like some new reactionary had picked up. You know, every now and then you get a bubble, and like, you know, someone big like Julia Hartley-Brewer will retweet it and get 1,000 likes like James Dreyfus has here, and then you'll get 8 new abusive DMs of people sending you dick pics and stuff. And so I was just like, well, I've kept this up. I wrote it out. I got 10,000 replies, and I was right. I mean, I don't take back what I said. I mean, I can't really, like, when I was 11, I was annoyed by it, and I think it's misogynistic now. It's not a big deal. Anyway, I decided to delete it because I can't be asked to be getting... I mean, the long tail of this could be days. I mean, I'm still going to be getting comments. I suspect when I have a look now, there's still going to be comments because people would have screenshotted it and people would be looking up. Whatever. That's just how Twitter works. I kind of wussed out. I deleted it because I just don't want it to... like, 10k is a lot, but if, like, you know, it's only got to pick up someone super big. Like, imagine if, like, Donald Trump Jr. or some wanker saw it, then suddenly it could hit, like, 20k or something, and it'd be... I just can't be asked. Anyway, I wussed out. But yeah, it's just worth pointing out those things. Like, people love to fucking hate people who attack misogyny. Gender critical people do not give a shit about misogyny at all, as long as it's a way of dunking on trans people. And whatever the third point I said was, who knows. Anyway, I think this is the last one. Oh no, second last one. Sorry the show has gone a long time. Sorry I started late. I love you all for sticking around. So my last things are... so the Transatlantic Call-In Show, which is a show where you can call in and talk about trans issues. That's on tomorrow, 11 p.m. UK time. Last week was our first ever episode. We had 10 callers. It was amazing. We had a really great conversation. I'd love you if you would love to watch it. That would be great. This person threatened to call in. They didn't call in. Arden was like, why didn't you call in last week? And then they come up with some excuse saying it was constantly engaged. And then they said, please don't be offended, Arden. For all of your rather girlish charms, I prefer to focus my attention, should I call, on Katie Montgomery, who presents as the full bloom of transgenderist womanhood. Oh, I was so flattered. And I was like, not sure what the difference between us is, but I'm sure Arden wouldn't be jealous that you fancy me more. And then they've said... Oh shit, I just realised I didn't censor this person at all. Please don't look up this person. This is me slamming it in the last minute. It is a troll account. Please genuinely do not go and harass this person. They've said, I'm sure Arden has enough admirers. It would be so wonderful for us to celebrate our wedding night, Katie, when I finally drop my trousers and you burst out laughing and say, if mine was that small, I wouldn't have bothered getting it removed. It will be a special moment. What are you on about? Why are these people so weird? Anyway, last comment. Moving on. Final comment of the show. I got this comment on an old episode of TERF Wars. And if you're watching, like, thank you for watching. This person has said, I just left the gender critical movement. The tipping point was the support for neo-Nazis and the homophobic movements. And the homophobic and transphobic rhetoric that you easily find in a conversion therapy camp that I was so blind to see. I lost my friends, my partner, everything. I really hope I reconnect with my friends, but I know it was going to take time. As up until yesterday, I was posting hundreds of stories against trans women and their agenda. What drew me into the gender critical movement was the false rhetoric of female and lesbian erasure. Meanwhile, gender critical people are the ones erasing us without even realising it. So the reason I wanted to include this was 2 reasons. One is people do stop being gender critical. And if that's you, you know, some trans people might struggle to forgive you in the short term. I'm ready to. If you want to DM me on Twitter or send me a comment on YouTube about anything, like, I'm ready to hear from you. I'm ready to forgive you. Like, it's okay. People get sucked into bullshit. People get radicalized into cults. And that's just an unfortunate reality of humans. You know, like, I'm glad. I would rather everyone learns what was wrong and moves on than no one does. And if you don't forgive people, it's harder for them to move on. And the second thing I'd like to say is the reason they got radicalized was about this erasing lesbians or erasing gay people. And I'm sad that people kind of fall for this, but they do. And I think that as trans people and trans allies, we have to be aware of this, that people do genuinely get sucked in by this. And we need to, 1, not accidentally contribute to it with clumsy wording. And 2, just tell people who we think have been caught by this why that's not the case. If a gender critical person comes at you and they say, I'm a gay man, I'm a lesbian woman, and I think trans people are telling me that I have to, like, be attracted to certain people, whatever. You just want to say, actually, like, I hear you, but this has been blown out of proportion by trolls and people who don't know what they're talking about, and the gender critical hype wagon, which has just completely invented a load of garbage. Sorry, Poppy's trying to eat my leftover dinner. If you, like, you can't choose who you're attracted to, and that's important to say to lesbian and gay people and bisexual people. There's a whole conversation here, but I just, you know, it's just important to say you can't have trans rights without gay rights, and you can't, I don't think, have gay rights without trans rights. And if anyone has had that communicated to them in a way where they feel like the two are at odds, then, you know, you have got the wrong end of the stick, but at the same time, that might be partially our fault for not communicating it properly. So, you know, DM someone who is ready to listen, because there are people out there, loads of trans people are ready to have this conversation. I am. And, you know, we're all in this together. Anyway, thank you very much for sticking around for this episode. I know I've gone on a long time, a very long time, and I know I was late and my voice is starting to lose, and it was a bit of a rage fest, and I talked about my own Yorkie crusade. But genuinely, thank you very much for everyone who stuck around for the whole thing. I love you all. This week, it's quite an intense weekend for me. So tomorrow I have the XX Factor at 9 p.m. Then I have Transatlantic at 11 p.m. If you have a question or argument, like, we'll take gender critical calls, we'll take TERF calls, we'll take transphobe calls, whatever you are, however you categorize yourself. If you want to talk about trans people, call in, we'll take you. We'll prioritize people who want to argue. Like, I want to have that conversation with you. That's at 11 p.m. Then on Sunday at 10:30 p.m, not totally sure. Whenever the Atheist Experience is normally on, I'm on the Atheist Experience for the first time with Matt Dillahunty, and I'm very excited because this is like, the Atheist Experience is quite a big show. It's going to be fun. And not only that, but my birthday is on Monday. And due to the time zones, I'm going to turn 32 live on air on the Atheist Experience at the end of the show. So I would absolutely love for you to come and watch me on that as part of my birthday celebration, count in my new year with me, and it will be really exciting. So anyway, I love you all. Thank you so much for sticking around. I've been seeing the chat go off the whole time, and it makes me feel great. This week has been kind of shit. Not just because of the Yorkie thing, but just shit in general because of fucking Fair Play for Women and their bullshit. So I really appreciate everyone here, and I love you. So I will see you soon. Hopefully I'll see you at least one more time over the weekend. Don't feel obliged, but if you would like to come, I would love to have you there. And I'll see you soon.